Nikon here from the Hyperactive Bookworm. I'm so excited because I am going to talk today to the amazing Jess Lee, who you can sort of see her cover already there, but that's the full one. And we will be talking about, oh, it's not going to really reflect, is it? All right, A Curious Woman, which is a sapphic cozy mystery, and oh my God, it is amazing. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited about it. All right, so we'll dive in with some questions. So can you sum up A Curious Woman in 3 words?
Murder, romance, chickens.
Oh, I love it. And they're so words that you would not normally think would go together, but in this book, they go so well together.
The chickens are a very important part.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They are absolutely a major part of it. Now, I love cozy mysteries. I only discovered cozy mysteries about 2 years ago. I think this is like my first sapphic one, and oh my God, it was the book that I never realized I needed. But because of course there's a murder in it, did you know who the murderer would be from the beginning?
Oh, I'm slightly embarrassed to admit this, but I actually don't remember who the murderer was going to be in the beginning. That the process of writing, because it was my first novel, was such a kind of chaotic process, and there was so much back and forth and so many pieces of butcher's paper all over the floor. It's a little bit of a blur. I know I did want the murderer to be a person who you would not necessarily expect, because I did grow up reading Agatha Christie, which taught me that always the least likely person.
Yeah.
I was very surprised as an adult to learn from interviews with police officers that that's actually not true. But yes, I did want it to be someone maybe not completely expected.
Oh, it was so brilliant to read. The amount of time, I'm not sure if you've looked at all the posts that I've done so far in the book club, but the amount of times I've scratched out, oh my God, it could be this person or this person. Oh my God, the red herrings in this book are amazing. So
I'm so glad you enjoyed them.
I did. It was so much fun. So what inspired you to set it where you did? For anyone who hasn't read it, watching from home, it is set in Australia, and sorry.
Yeah, it is set in Australia, and I do apologise. You might be hearing the sounds of my cat destroying the lounge room in the background. I'm going to try and cover the top
No,
of that.
that's fine. Not a problem.
It's set in Australia, and it's set in a town on the southwest coast of Victoria. The town it's set in, Port Banner, is a fictionalised little world. But that part of Victoria is quite close to my heart. I used to go there for holidays when I was a kid, and now as an adult. So those places like Warrnambool and Port Fairy and Portland, which if anyone hasn't been there, are very beautiful. They're very kind of wild and windswept places. They have these really majestic coastlines, and this really wild history of shipwrecks and seafaring and the whaling industry in that area. So it has a certain natural romance about it that I was really drawn to.
Oh, I love that. And it's such a huge, like, it's a character unto itself in the novel, and it's just so absolutely wonderful. Because it is just all wrapped up, and being Australian myself, I love reading books that I can relate to more on that kind of cultural level. So it's really fun. So if you were to go on a road trip, which character from A Curious Woman are you taking with you on the road, and why? I just want to put a little caveat here. I'm pretty sure I stole this question from the amazing Laura.
Credit to the amazing Laura. It's a really good question. If I was to go on a road trip with one of the characters, look, slightly strange answer. I think it would probably have to be Georgina, the very ruthless, rapacious property developer, because she's got a really sweet car. It is comfortable. It's got a driver. I mean, I wouldn't really want to talk to her, but if we popped in a podcast for the road trip, I think it could be a very comfortable journey.
I love that answer so much because it's obviously not the answer that people who've read the book are going to immediately assume. That's fantastic. I absolutely love that. So who was your favorite character to write?
Oh, look, it would have to be the three teenage nerds. So Zan, Tanny, and Squid. I love, I had so much fun writing these characters because they had this combination of extraordinary intelligence and a great capacity for telling it like it is, but also, certain deficits in the area of social skills and manners and perhaps personal hygiene.
And the fact that they're still teenagers, like.
Yeah. I think there's something very liberating about writing characters like that. And of course I enjoyed writing Margaret Gale, the Ice Queen, with her sarcastic take on the world.
Oh, I love Margaret. Like, I remember reading the first chapter and laughing so hard that all this stuff happened. And then somewhere near the end of the first chapter, it's something like she allowed herself a small smile. I'm like, oh, it so wraps up the Ice Queen that she is. I laughed out loud with that because it just hit with the rest of the scene.
Oh, you've got to ration those smiles. You don't want to hand them out too freely.
So I didn't actually realize this was your debut, but that's absolutely amazing. That blows me away because it's such a well-developed book and the characters are just like, you can see them. You can imagine walking down like a seaside town and walking past them. They're so real and tactile that it was amazing. When writing, are you a plotter or a discovery writer?
God, I would be happy to be either of those things. I think I'm just a sort of hot mess writer. I mean, usually what I tend to do, I tend to plunge into a story with no real plan because I'm just intrigued by a setting or a character or a scenario, and then write for way too long in that way. Then realise that I've got absolutely no idea where I'm going. So then I try and overcompensate by writing these plots of incredible, like, labyrinthine detail that is ludicrous, and I can't remember what's meant to be happening next. So then there's a process of sort of pulling back and trying to shave down the ridiculous details that I've put in there and bringing it back to the characters and the relationships that actually need to be the real heart of the story. It's not a very orderly way of doing it. I think that probably grown-up writers have a better process than that, but that's what mine looks like at the moment.
Grown-up writers, I like that. I like that term. That's fantastic. And I think I'm going to have to add to that question now. When I ask other authors, are you a plotter, a discovery writer, or a hot mess? I think that's fantastic. I love it. Yeah. So, are you able to tell us what was that thing that started A Curious Woman off then? Was it a character or a setting, or if you remember?
That's an interesting question. Look, I'd long had a fascination with ice queens, and I love books about them. I love TV shows about them. I think I knew I wanted to write about one. And I'd had at the time when I was writing it a particular enjoyment of Pamela Rave's character on Wentworth. So there's probably a little bit of a physical reminiscence there. But in terms of, I think the other inspiration actually was going to, I believe it was Port Fairy, that has a very quirky local museum. And country towns in general, if you ever get the chance to go to a local museum in an Australian country town, they are gold. They have some very strange and peculiar and interesting yet boring things that make for a very kind of diverting couple of hours. So I think being in this very, very quirky Port Fairy museum, which is full of, at the time, was full of these really creepy waxwork dummies that were sort of dressed in historical costume. It had a certain atmosphere to it that was very memorable. So I wanted to write a story that was set in a place like that.
Oh, that's so cool. I remember going up to Cairns and they had like this weird museum there, and yeah, the strange items within the museum. You're like, how are these two things in the same museum? Interesting.
That inspired probably Margaret's Museum, which is a more
Oh,
traditional
okay.
kind of rural, a
Yep.
small museum that probably doesn't have a lot of money and has sort of strange
Yep.
local art in it. Cabinet of Curiosities is operating on a more lavish scale and is a bit more self-consciously zany. And I think that was probably inspired by a certain other gallery in Australia that, probably shouldn't be named for legal reasons, but is big and zany and a little bit to the south of Victoria.
I love it. Oh, that's brilliant. Um, sorry. So, were you a reader when you were young? And if so, what books did you read? Because you said before you read a lot of Agatha Christie, so that's obviously been an influence. But was there anything else that you sort of dove a lot into?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. I mean, yes, I was a huge reader when I was young. I think I was a bigger reader back then before screens came into my adult life and destroyed my brain. Yeah, I was a huge reader as a child. And when I sort of look at the books I grew up reading, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and it was kind of a golden age of Australian children's literature. It was a terrific time to be a bookworm in Australia. So we had those writers like Paul Jennings and Robin Klein and Gillian Rubinstein and Nadia Wheatley, who often had this really quirky, strange, kind of humorous but very dark take on the world, that looking back now probably was a bit of a formative influence now that I think about it. And of course, growing up, that generation as well, I read a huge amount of Roald Dahl, who I'm assuming has probably been banned for children nowadays because he's so subversive and nightmarish and scary. But
Probably has been. You're right, and that
yeah,
saddens me because I love Roald Dahl.
look, the sort of freedom of imagination that's present in those books is really wonderful. Yeah, so all of those and a lot of Enid Blyton. I think looking back now, all the girls' boarding school books may have had a subtext that spoke to the younger me that I didn't fully appreciate at the
Yeah.
time.
Isn't it fun looking back and going, oh, that all makes sense
Yeah,
now?
yeah, makes sense. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. So, what was the hardest scene for you to write in A Curious Woman?
Probably the last chapter and the little sort of epilogue bit at the very end. I think I'd had a bit of a mindset that said, I'd written the big kind of climax of the story, the big action-packed climax of the story. And
Yeah.
I think subconsciously I thought, well, that's sorted then. So I just need to wrap this up quickly and it'll all be finished quite easily. And I think I almost had a bit of an administrative view of the end of the story where I thought, oh, the job is just to tie up all the loose plot ends and kind of explain what's happened to everyone. But of course, that's not really what the end of the story is about at all. It's actually about the relationship and the characters and how they've changed and where they're at now. And it took me a couple of rewrites to really appreciate that.
Oh, well, that's really interesting. I love hearing just the processes and the enjoyments and the struggles, and because everyone has different strengths and weaknesses and everyone finds it, so I just find it really fascinating. um what's a book you've read recently that you could recommend?
Ooh, if anyone's looking for a really heartwarming lesbic romance, I just read Hooked on You by Jen Matthews, I think, which is a really, really sweet, chill read if you're after, that really tender kind of romance. And in a completely different genre, I'm rereading the books of Sue Townsend, the creator of The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole.
Yeah.
I haven't read her books in years, and I'm just kind of falling back in love with her take on the world that is so weird and kind of brutally funny
Oh, I
and
love that.
realistic, but also a bit surrealist at times. So yeah, she's well worth a second read.
Excellent. Oh, that's great. And no, absolutely. I love recommendations in all genres. I'm pretty open to read most things. So this is just to help my TBR grow completely out of hand even more than it already is. Are you currently working on anything at the moment, and can you tell us anything about it if you are?
Oh, I am. I'm actually working on a sequel to A Curious Woman.
Really?
So yeah, it is reaching manuscript completion at the moment. So yeah, it's all being well. We should get to spend a bit more time with Margaret and Bess.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. It's ridiculous how excited I am about that.
I'm so pleased.
Oh, but I just, yeah, like I said at the start, it's like that, because yeah, I've only just been introduced to Cozy Mysteries recently. Didn't even know there were really any sapphic ones out there. And finding A Curious Woman, I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Because it has all those elements, but it has characters I can actually identify with. And it's just such an amazing book. Guys, if you are watching, you haven't read it, we have not spoiled this book. So please go read it. It is so great.
Thank you.
And I'll make sure I put the link down in the comments as well. So if anyone's wondering, I will add the link down there.
Thank you.
No worries. And where can we find all things Jess Lee?
Oh, well, you can find out about me and my books at ylvapublishing.com. That's YLVA. You can connect with me on Facebook at Jess Lee 9655. Terrible tag. I apologise for that one. Or Twitter at Jess Lee Musings. Or if you want the old digital snail mail, Jess Lee Contact, all one word, at gmail.com.
Oh, wow. Excellent. I will grab all those links and make sure that I have them all in the comments as well, guys, so that you can go and find out about the sequel. Oh my gosh, that is just the best news. I am so looking forward to.
I'm so pleased you're pleased.
And is it still from the same perspective, same person's perspective?
Yes, it's still the same, I guess,
Same
split
character.
between our two heroines.
Yay! Okay, cool. Oh, that's so exciting. Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining us, Jess, and for taking the
Thank you
time
very
out.
much for having me.